Hello and welcome to Faith Talks. In today's program, we'll be asking, can faith cure a stressful life? Joining me in the studio to talk about stress and faith is Rosemary Lethbridge and Douglas McCormack, both of them pastors here in the south of England. Welcome to the studio today. Stress. It's a word that's being tossed around, isn't it? People are like, oh, I'm so stressed out, I have my GCSEs. Oh, I'm so stressed out, I'm just so stressed. And perhaps it is a word that's being overused. But what does stress actually feel like, Douglas?
Oh, stress is something we live with on a day-by-day basis, and people react and feel it in different ways. And I think sometimes it comes down to your personality, and how well you deal with things as to what stress is going to feel like for you. For some people, they need it to function. For others, it's like a dark cloud over everything that they do.
But we do need stress. I think it is God-given reaction to help us react in situations. It motivates us, it gets us out of danger as chemicals flood into our body. What isn't good is prolonged stress. And I think that is what, as a society, we are struggling with now, because prolonged stress is keeping your body flooding with those toxins and chemicals, and it doesn't do you any good at all.
So there are two different levels of stress is what you're saying. There's that stress that we have in a reaction to a dangerous situation. Mm-hmm. If you've been chased by a lion down Southampton or whatever it is, that adrenaline and those chemicals just give us a rush to react in a dangerous situation. But then you also mentioned that chronic stress, that long drawn out stress that just wears our bodies down. But then we live in a country and we live in a part of England that has a high level of stress. Why is that? How do we cope with that?
I think people come up with different coping mechanisms. And for me, as someone who believes in God helped me get through a lot of stress, even when I was too stressed even to think clearly about connecting with him. I knew that others were connecting with him on my behalf, so that was all part of the healing process to get through the burnout that came as a result of stress.
And I think it's very fair to say that all three of us have experienced severe stress in our lives. Yes. And sometimes it gets to us really big time. That's why we want to talk about it. But we are looking at 47%, I think it is, in the southeast of England are living with constant stress. That's high. Why are we living in a society that is so stressful?
I think, certainly from my own experience, I spent the first 11 years of my ministry in Ireland. And one of the things I enjoyed about living in Ireland was the slower pace of life. There was nothing gave me greater pleasure than having worked in the morning and then going down to my brother-in-law's farm and spending the evening milking the cows and feeding the sheep. And then suddenly you come into a completely different environment. I live down in Southampton now, and the pace, it's just unreal. I'm surprised at how much people try to stuff into their lives or cram into their lives. I know children who are doing activities 7 days a week. So you got school all day, and then it's something in the afternoon, something in the evening, and that constant flow. There doesn't seem to be any break in it. That constant pushing to be achieving, that constant, I suppose, thing to be something more than maybe what your parents were, or what they want for their children.
But isn't it also so that we determine success by keeping busy?
Yeah, and I think this is one of the problems that line managers and ourselves now come to expect more than the legislated working week. If you only do those hours in a whole variety of careers, you're not seen as being committed to the job. So that adds to the pressure that we are all feeling, whatever work we are in.
So it's partly self-inflicted, but also expected by line managers that we perform more than we actually have signed up for, isn't it? And that goes across a variety of jobs. And
I think even more so because, you know, we're used to these things. We expect them almost within our working environment. But, you know, the expectation that kids are facing in school, you know, so that stress that we normally associate with adult life. I think, you know, kids are being exposed to it at much younger ages, you know, with I suppose with the expectations with school, you know, the exams, the SATs, and everything that they have to do right from primary school all the way through to their GCSEs and their A levels. You know, there's a level of pressure and stress there that I certainly don't remember when I was at school. I certainly don't remember it.
And that has nothing to do with age, but there is that you don't remember it. But it's pretty much, you're seeing that stress lived out in your young daughters' lives. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. You know, I mean, my youngest daughter's just started secondary school. And, you know, already next week she has her SATs.
But school was just starting 1 or 2 weeks ago.
Yes, I think she's done 10 days. So they're taking the kids off for an adventure trip for Monday and Tuesday, and then I think they come back to sit these exams, which will start their levels for school. But, you know, right at the beginning of school, they have these exams, and, you know,
this pressure.
That pressure's straight on. My eldest daughter's just starting her GCSEs, and of course, you know, already the homework started to roll in. You know, the timetables are there, the exams that they'll be doing later on in the term. You know, all these things. You know, the pressure, it doesn't let up now. You know, you start school and it's bang, you're right in.
But how do you as a parent address that when you're seeing that? Because I agree with you. I don't remember it being that intense pressure at such an early age. How do you as a parent see, is my child too stressed? Is my child coping with the pressure?
I think, you know, as parents, you know, when you spend time with your family, you know, I'm one of those dads who likes to have meal times together. You know, the TV goes off, we have our dinner round the table, and, you know, that's a time to reflect on the day that you've had. It's a time to get to know your children. And you know, I think over time you hope that when they do experience difficulties, not only will you as a parent be able to recognize some of the signs, but that, you know, they will be able to talk to you about it. It's amazing the number of children who don't feel able to talk to their parents.
But you were deliberate. You said, you know, the television goes off, we sit down to a meal. That takes deliberate planning, and I think this is part of managing stress, whatever age you are. You have to make some decisions to lower the pace, and to slow it down, and whether that is sitting over a meal with time to talk so that everything can be addressed.
I mean, we're talking about external pressures being put on us, you know, and I think we're going to look a little bit later at some of the pressures we put on ourselves. But how do you recognize this sign as an adult in your own life that you're becoming too stressed? What are some of the things that kind of are warning bells that you are over the, I would say, acceptable level of stress? Because there's a little bit of stress regularly, you know, the stress with the commuting into work, or, you know, those kind of irritation moments that cause a bit of stress. I need to make it on time. But there comes a boundary level where it kills over.
Well, I can only talk about how my body started to react to too much continued stress. And that was my sight started to be affected. I had a lot of memory loss. And in fact, since I've recovered from the burnout, a lot of, I call my hard drive, is still wiped clean. So that was, and other physical symptoms as well, which I chose to ignore. And unfortunately, the body comes to the point where you can ignore it no longer, and it has to do something in order to save you from yourself, really.
What about you, Douglas? What are some of the...
I think, you know, from my own personal experience, you know, I went through a period in my life where I was exposed to stress on a daily basis for a considerable amount of time, you know, over a number of years. And I didn't initially recognize the signs that were going on. I don't sleep well at the best of times, but when I'm particularly stressed, my sleep just sort of disintegrates completely.
Like last night, thinking about coming today.
Yes.
Indeed.
And I apologize for adding stress to your life, talking about stress.
I used to get these terrible moments during the night where I wasn't sure whether I was awake or asleep. The room was completely dark, and it was spinning, and all the things that I was dealing with at that given time, I could hear them resounding in my head. Mm-hmm. I used to describe it as a million different voices pulling me in a million different ways, and once I learned to deal with that, I mean that never happened again. But stress does, when we're especially when we're exposed to it for a long period of time, it has an impact upon our physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being.
I mean, I know personally when I get very stressed, and I've had a burnout as well, I crave chocolate.
Yes.
I don't want to be with people. And I have these kind of like memory losses instantly. Like you'll be talking to me, I'm thinking, what did you just say? So kind of not really blackouts, but just your hard drive just kind of like freezes for a moment. And that's some of the ways that I experience stress. And when I talk about it, a lot of people are surprised that how can you as a minister and as a Christian be stressed? Surely Christians are not supposed to be stressed.
Well, God has given us the ideal, and he even realised the pressures that we're going to be under, and gave us a 24-hour period that we call the Sabbath on Saturday, to help us cope with that. But of course, we are not human beings doing exactly all that we should be doing. And so even with the safeguards that God has put into place, if we ignore those, or as pastors, are very, very busy with different programs and things on those Sabbath hours, we're not getting that downtime that God intended.
But isn't it amazing that people's perceptions of clergy is that you have kind of that serenity, robe around you that, you're always calm, you're never stressed. And the reality, when I'm speaking with clergy, is very different, Douglas.
I think, and in what you've just said, that in itself is probably half the reason the stress exists. Because on the one half, trying to maintain maybe a public persona that's different from your private one. As a pastor, many people expect you to have the answers to their questions, to be able to solve their problems. So they come to you, they share their innermost secrets. And in many ways, that has an isolating impact upon you as a minister. And so you have this stress building up over time and nowhere to let it go. And so, you that in itself then sort of builds up on the stress. So it almost becomes some sort of like perpetuating cycle where it's just feeding itself with nowhere to go. And of course, that in itself then, takes you one stage further than stress and to burnout and maybe to a full-blown nervous breakdown.
I think it's very difficult for a congregation to understand some of that stress as a minister is experiencing. And I remember a 7-year-old boy kind of put it really, really clearly. He's like, Mom, I want to be a minister when I grow up and a car salesman. It's like, why? Well, 5 days a week I can work as a car salesman and I can drive nice cars. And then I can just be a minister that one day a week and just be up there speaking a sermon. And I think even though that's a child's perspective, it seems that carries into adulthood for some members. That the minister is there to produce a sermon for Saturday or Sunday, if that's the day they go to church. And then funerals and weddings and that's it.
That is often what people will say to you, when often when you say that you're a pastor, the first what do you do with yourself, for all week, I mean, they can associate you with the idea of leading out in church and preaching on a Saturday or a Sunday, but then when it comes to the rest of the week, what do you do with all that time? And of course, when you're trying to meet the expectations of your family, of your congregations, you know, and then of course those who are supervising or are overseeing your work, you know, there's a lot that falls into that, you know, whether it's relating to people who are going through financial difficulty or having problems with their marriage or simply just visiting the congregants. You know, there is, I think for me, you know, when I started ministry, the biggest shock was the variety of roles that you filled, and you know, not feeling quite able to be able to maybe answer the questions or fulfill those roles.
Or to do all of those roles well. I think most of us want to do a job to the very best of our ability, but when you have a lot of hats that you're wearing, it adds to your stress level in that you're trying to meet all those expectations.
And you know, it's also managing everybody's expectations, your congregation. And one thing I noticed is crisis never happens between 9 and 5 during the day, does it?
No,
you know, a crisis
not.
happens and
Yes.
in conflict with
Yes.
with some family time that you might have set aside, or times that is expected by your line managers for you to do something else, and that probably adds to the stress that you never kind of know what you're going into in the day.
But whatever job you're in, certainly in jobs that when you're dealing with people, there is always the unexpected. It's one of the things that makes working with people
Absolutely.
so exciting and so rewarding. And I don't think you can blame line managers necessarily in whatever line of work that you're in, because it's also down to us and our personalities and maybe the experiences we've had growing up that come together to make us who we are and maybe more susceptible to struggling with extreme stress.
But I want to throw the whole faith element into the discussions, because for many people, you know, stress, is that not just a lack of trusting in God if you as a Christian are experiencing stress?
I think we have to remember that stress is actually a warning to you as a person, to things that you're experiencing in your life. And you know, ultimately, you know, the biological reactions that we have toward a stressful situation is something that God has actually given us, to tell us actually there's something wrong at a given moment in your life, and you need to sit down and listen to what your body's telling you, because you can't continue on like this. And so, you know, for starters, God has built that into the design of the human body.
It's a safety mechanism,
is.
isn't it? Yeah.
But isn't religious life and isn't religious community also contributing to the stress that people can feel?
Well, I think some of the things that God has recommended that we do, such as take quiet time each day to contemplate Him, His love, and what people refer to as prayer, are all daily mechanisms that can help you slow your pace of life down. But when you break a leg, you need a doctor, you need it set in a cast, you need help. When your body has been overstressed, whether you have a faith or not, there's chemical imbalance, there are problems that manifest themselves, and you need to address them, and you need help with them. The trouble is that, I mean, for example, in my own life, I went from someone who could have 2 hours first thing in the morning with God and studying the Bible, to then, with my burnout, not even being able to focus on 5 minutes. So you get a double burden of guilt, not only guilt that you have let yourself get to this far, but guilt that others are saying, well, you know, you didn't trust God enough.
And also, I mean, I think if we are very honest, sometimes our own expectations of what a good religious life looks like you were saying, before I spend 2 hours, and then I'm starting to feel guilty that I, as a minister, I'm only spending 5 minutes with God in the morning, that's all I can. And we start inserting religious expectations on ourselves that adds to our stress level. Is that something you can recognize?
not sure how to answer that one. I don't know whether it was other people's response to my stress that stressed me more, or my own guilt that stressed me more. Because when you have a faith in God, people do say to you, well, has that helped you get through? Now, looking back, I can see that yes, it did. It helped me in a whole variety of ways. But at the time when I was going through it, I no longer had the mental ability to connect with God in the ways that I know would have helped deal and lessen my stress.
And I'm going to ask you, Rosemary, because, you have just recently had a burnout and you recently had to, you're saying your faith helped you through. How did it help you through in a practical way?
Okay, in a practical way, there were people who were praying for me. I could just literally say, God, I know you're there and I'm not alone. People sent me, there's promises, particularly in the Psalms, that show how God's saying, I'm with you when you're in tough times. So all of those things, I would just read and say, okay, this is what you're saying to me. I'm feeling really bad at the moment and I can't properly get my head around this, but I'm going to trust you because in the past you've proved trustworthy.
What about you, Douglas? Where was your faith, and was faith able to sustain you through some of the stress?
By far. I look back. There was a time in my life where I was actually quite ill. And I found myself not being able to cope very well with a lot of the things that were happening in my life. And so I actually had problems with my breathing. It came over me one night. I lay down in my bed and all of a sudden I found it hard to catch my breath. And it actually happened about a week before I was due to fly to the States on holiday. And I got myself, and it's just one of those things, it starts to fade, and I'm sitting thinking to myself, what if I have problems on the airplane and whatnot? I actually found myself, I had to visit my doctor, and I said, I've got a 9-hour flight to Atlanta, and I think I'm going to need some help. So I did. But because of my breathing difficulties, I actually found myself almost saying a little prayer every time I took a breath. I felt that it helped sort of not just focus my mind upon God, but it gave me that comfort and assurance that, regardless of how alone that I felt at that moment, I wasn't on my own.
Well, one of the stories in the Bible that was particularly helpful to me is where an individual called Peter finds himself in a situation where he's being swamped, literally. And I could visualize the way in which Jesus was there, almost taking his hand and pulling him up out of that situation. And so looking at how Jesus has helped other people when they've been overwhelmed for whatever reason was another reason why I knew that the God that it was the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow will be there for me as well.
And researchers out of Toronto in 2012 actually found that faith can actually help you to actually reduce your stress and anxiety. And I know, Rosemary, you talked about something called peace, some very practical steps to reduce stress and to get through that. Could you just share that with us here?
Well, when you're stressed, your body craves, your mind craves peace. And so a very lovely lady said this, that, P is about taking time to pause, actually listen to your body, think about it. Don't keep going as you are. So you need to pause. The E was find yourself an environment, a bit like Douglas was saying about the farm, where you can feel your heart rate slowing, where you can feel safe. The A was also looking at your attitudes. And it might be that you've got some unhelpful baggage from your past that's colouring the way you always say yes when people ask things to you. So you might need professional help to help you rethink your attitudes. And then the C is calm. Whether that's in the way that you spend time praying with God, thinking about something He's said in the Bible, but you need to actually physically look for ways to calm yourself down. And although I didn't do very well, the last one is E, and that's exercise. Apparently, the physicalness of exercise actually starts working on some of those chemicals that are raging unchecked in your body, and so all those things are practical ways in which you can experience peace in stressful times.
And both of you have, and I think that's a very good, using peace, and spell it out, and using those descriptions can actually help all of us just to reduce our levels of stress. So as we're coming to the end of the program, what would be your one thing that you would say to somebody who comes and says, Pastor, I'm really stressed?
Well, in many ways, Rosemary said it all. But for me, it's actually about, I suppose, almost dictating your own pace of life. Trying to put these things that Rosemary's mentioned in the piece, to put them into practice. Because we need to take time to reflect. And I think often people who live with stress on a constant basis, they're not taking that time to reflect on how the environment in which they find themselves is having an impact upon themselves. And so taking time to reflect and finding that for me it was, I love the farm, and spending as much time on that just brings so much quiet and stillness that I wasn't getting in the day-to-day aspects of my life.
Well, I want to say thank you to both of you for coming in and sharing your personal experience on stress and some good tips on how to cope with it. And I hope that you will add your voice to the debate by visiting our Facebook group or emailing us your thoughts on today's program. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.